So odds are everyone has heard by now that the Overwatch League is back, albeit it is looking a little different now. Activision Blizzard has named the replacement for the Overwatch League the Overwatch Champions Series, or the OWCS for short. This contains 3 groups from Asia, North America, and the EMEA, with the EMEA containing Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Each region has its own open qualifiers, which leads to tournaments which will determine the top teams that will play in the live events. And one difference worth noting here when looking at these different qualifiers and tournaments and such is that the Asian region does have many more qualifiers and smaller events before leading to the majors and finals. This is done with the goal of catering to the popularity of the esport in that region. And I'll come back to this idea of the popularity of esports in different countries and different regions and all that, but for now, I just think this is a really neat system for like an Overwatch esport that will be catering more to the individual regions when possible in terms of providing access to competitive Overwatch content. I think that's huge, and I think that's very beneficial, and it should, be nice for the fans and be nice for the company, Activision Blizzard overall, as they are able to provide more content to people who want more content. And to finish off the discussion involving the events and the overall format, all of these small events and then, larger tournaments all culminate into 2 international events that will be hosted in May and November. And while this is pretty cool, and like I mentioned before, it now allows for practically any group of 5 players to form a team and enter into these competitive tournaments, there's still a problem for me. And this problem comes back to what we were just talking about with the popularity of esports. And the question is, will this league be profitable? And now you're probably thinking, why does this matter? Blizzard is probably just trying to tie down some rich investors, sponsors, and some of their own money into getting this league started and to keep it going. But as we saw with the previous iteration of Overwatch with the Overwatch League, this wasn't really sustainable. In talking about that sustainability, I just want to go over some things that I found while doing research that sort of showed how much money was really poured into Overwatch League. The first thing that I saw was something that was revealed in an interview with Bobby Kotick and Robert Kraft. Robert Kraft is a billionaire, most notably the owner of the NFL team, the New England Patriots, as well as the Overwatch League team, the Boston Uprising. In this interview, he did disclose that $500 million of Blizzard's own money was set aside to help fund the league. This is no small amount. That's the least I can say. And of course, it is worth noting that Blizzard is worth about $74 billion, so sure, they won't notice this kind of money being put down somewhere, but still, it is a substantial amount of money. And alongside this huge down payment from Activision Blizzard, we also see that there are a lot of general franchising fees to join the Overwatch League, at least back in 2017. You know that the first 12 Overwatch League teams paid about $20 million each to join the league, and every expansion team that we know of, at least in 2018, paid $30 to $35 million. We also have to think about the money paid by streaming platforms like Twitch and YouTube to exclusively stream their content on that site. We do know that Twitch paid about $90 million over 2 years at one point to stream this Overwatch competitive content. And we also have to think about companies and other sponsors that provide equipment and other general merch for the Overwatch League. In terms of equipment, I think of companies like Logitech and Razer. And I say all this to demonstrate that we have all seen Overwatch at what many would call its peak in terms of popularity. And we've seen how this popularity has in turn helped attract numerous wealthy individuals, companies, and organizations to invest serious amounts of money in hopes of one day seeing a return. Now moving on to the modern day image of Overwatch 2, things are a bit more complicated. First, we look at the image and reputation of Activision Blizzard, who in the past would use that image to attract sponsors, but now instead display an extensive timeline of sexism and workplace harassment, which previously caused them to lose all of their sponsors during the Overwatch League 2022 season. And on a larger economic scale, we should be expecting a U.S. recession in mid-2024, alongside the current recession that is being felt by many countries using the euro as a currency. My goal in saying this isn't to be all doom and gloom, but to point out that these times are very different in an economic sense than when the Overwatch competitive scene initially started. I would argue that this means that it should be harder to convince companies to pump money into esports in comparison to before, especially when profits are not guaranteed. I mean, imagine starting a new esports league where no one expects to generate profit anytime in the near future, in times where economic hardships are being faced or will be faced in the near future. So this is all to say that from like an outsider's perspective, it doesn't really seem that Activision Blizzard is really setting themselves up for success. But after saying all of this, you're probably asking, well, if they're not setting themselves up for success, what are your concerns with the league? And for me, I'm afraid, and maybe naively so, that this league will not have the same longevity as the previous Overwatch League because it will face the same issues in terms of lack of profitability. The only place that I can see a league working out like this would be in China, which, let's not forget, doesn't have access to Overwatch 2 servers anymore, since their licensing agreement with NetEase expired last year. And the only reason the league would work there is, as I kind of mentioned before, esports are culturally perceived different in comparison to other parts of the world. China is one of those places where, especially in the mobile gaming sense, it's very much accepted and even widely celebrated to be into something like that in comparison to places like in the US. So overall, I think that while this restructured version of the league works, it even seems to be more inclusive towards registering new teams and allowing them to compete. I think that the timing is very poor. With factors like the current negative perception of Overwatch 2, the current struggling state of the economic world, as well as the lack of popularity of esports in places outside of China, the current allegations and issues plaguing the workplace of Activision Blizzard could and will negatively impact sponsors, as well as could affect employees' abilities to feel comfortable and secure enough to be passionate about making this version of the Overwatch League the best that it can be. This isn't even mentioning the 1,900 employees who were laid off, which is about 8% of Microsoft's gaming division, and the key figures involved in the casting and production of the Overwatch League, like the Observers, Matt, and So, whose losses will be immediately felt by the Overwatch community. In the end, I'm torn. If you can't tell by now, I obviously love Overwatch, and I want this league to work, but I'm just having a hard time seeing that happen. I think that at some point we'll be right back where we started, with this league ending and everyone saying goodbye to another iteration of the Overwatch community. I really do hope that I'm wrong.